delegates, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Atika. I will be the master of ceremony for Indonesia Pavilion today. We would like to begin our first session today. Without further ado, before we begin, we would like to invite His Excellency Bapak Hermono, the Government of Indonesia's Ambassador for the Kingdom of Spain, to giving the opening remarks. To Bapak Hermono, the stage is yours.
Her Excellency, Madam Ellen Agren, Sweden's Ambassador for the Ocean, distinguished speakers, panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, buenos dias, and selamat pagi. It is an honor to welcome all of you in our discussion this morning. As you are all aware, the discussions on ocean is rising and getting much attention. Based on the IPCC Special Report on the Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate, or HROCC, we were made aware by the impact of climate change to the ocean, which is way worse than how we thought it was. Therefore, there is a need for immediate actions by all of us to overcome these problems. Indonesia also awares the call by implementing various actions gearing ocean's stable role in climate regulation, as well as its positive relationship with coastal communities and ecosystem. Today's discussion will expose actions that are happening in Indonesia and other countries. We will focus on the development of ecosystem-based adaptation in marine and coastal communities as a solution. Why? It is because the SROCC has reminded us all of the state of coastal ecosystems which are under stress from combination of ocean warming, intensified marine heat waves, ocean acidification, loss of oxygen, and sea level rise, plus adverse effects from human activities on ocean and land. The SROCC also tells us that changes in the ocean have degraded marine ecosystem services, leading to impacts on fisheries and food, trade and transport, challenging their governments. The report states that coastal communities are exposed to climate-related hazards, including tropical cyclones, extreme sea level and flooding, marine heat waves, sea ice loss, and permafrost thaw. We were also reminded by the report that climate change impact on fish catches will affect income, livelihoods, and food security of resource-dependent communities. In short, vulnerable communities in coral reefs environment are expected to face adaptation's limits, even under a low emission scenario well before the end of the century. But the report also gives us hope. If we have ambitious adaptation, that it has potential to reduce risk in many locations and facilitate adaptation beyond year 2100. Options were assisting the functional integrity of marine ecosystem in the future, including protection, restoration, ecosystem-based management, and the reduction of pollution and other stressors are also available. There is also optimism that networks of marine protected areas can help maintain existing ecosystem services, can also facilitate the poleward and attitudinal movement of population, species, and ecosystem that are already occurring in response to warming and sea level rise. The discussion is then expected to reinforce the report convincing opinion that marine habitat restoration and ecosystem management tool can be locally effective in enhancing ecosystem-based adaptation. strengthening the responsiveness and precautionary approaches of existing fisheries management strategies will reduce negative climate change impact on fisheries. Sustainable fisheries management practice will reduce climate risk. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, through this discussion, I would like to join forces in introducing ecosystem-based adaptation, or EB, as a nature-based solution that use ecosystem services as part of a holistic adaptation strategy. It is a people-centric concept, but one that acknowledges that human resilience depends critically on the integrity of ecosystem. It puts people at the driving seats of marine nature-based solution to climate change. This approach advocates for community-based management leading to effective management of coastal community fisheries and local implementation of managed access to marine resources. This is done through the establishment of effective decision-making system empowered to manage coastal resources to provide social and economic benefits to communities and provide effective protection to critical habitats and coastal biodiversity. EBA is also about trust in community engagement through various tools, including behavior adaptation strategies that help build cohesion and cooperation within the community. Coastal community desired behavior is imperative in promoting more sustainable practice in the use of natural resources due to its function for enhancement and empowerment of biodiversity-based ecosystem services. IPA for Indonesia is about a center where conservation and people cross paths. It also involves a wide range of ecosystem management activities to increase the resilience and reduce the vulnerability of people and the environment to climate change. It also has a co-benefit of achieving climate change mitigation by reducing the emission that transpire from habitat loss and ecosystem degradation. EBA overcomes the challenges on fish replenishment and then sustain local fisheries as well as conserve important biodiversity and the coastal habitats they rely on. This will ensure accrual benefits retained by the coastal fisheries and their constituent communities in doing the management and changing fishing behavior. The session will highlight ecosystem-based adaptation as an approach to reduce the impact of climate change, especially to coastal communities and small-scale fisheries. Experiences from mainstreaming of EBA from various countries shall be used to expound challenges and opportunities from the perspective of governments and civil society organizations. A better understanding of the role of EBA shall be achieved in order to guide policymakers and decision makers to develop and implement adaptation strategies for fisheries. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, there are several programs that has been done by the government of Indonesia using EBA concepts such as Coastal Resilience Development Program that emphasize on co-management and has already implemented in 47 districts. Hybrid engineering and geotextile that has already implemented in 50 districts, and marine protected areas that has already designated to 22.68 million hectares. There are many other EBA program examples that we can learn each other from its countries. Finally, I would like to thank the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia, which organized the Pavilion of Indonesia for providing us the opportunity and space to have this discussion. I would also like to thank the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries for organizing this side event and to RARE for its support that makes this event possible. In closing, we hope the discussion will give insight to all participants on action needed to reduce the impact of climate change in ocean. Thank you, and I wish you a productive and fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Bapak Hermono, for the opening remarks. And then, without further delay, we will begin our first session today with the title of Developing Ecosystem-Based Adaptation in Marine and Coastal Communities. Therefore, I would like to invite the moderator of the session, Alexandra Gambua, to the stage. To Alexandra, the stage is yours.
Hi everyone, good morning and thank you for being here with us today. Thank you to His Excellency Hermono for opening the session. And I think we all agree that COP25, the COP this year, is very special to all of us, and it's been so monumental in our work to finally have oceans being put in the agenda of the UNFCCC. We've seen that we had Oceans Day last Saturday, and there have been numerous oceans events already in the first week. And now we have the second week where we have learned about the critical role that oceans play in solving climate change, as our keynote speaker has highlighted, where we really see that it is a critical habitat and it is essential to keeping the biodiversity and other ecosystem services of the ocean ecosystem, as well as we've seen its immense sequestration potential and really its huge role in maintaining food security all over the globe. And with this, we move forward with the side event in the hopes of taking on all that we've learned about the oceans and really linking it with the developments that we will be seeing and talking about in climate finance. We will be hearing from our speakers their learnings as members of donor organizations, the best practices that they've seen, and also the opportunities that we will have moving forward for this type of work. So to start us off, may I please call on Ms. Helen Agren, Ambassador for the Oceans from the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs, to talk to us about the relevance of the oceans for climate and COP25.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Hermono, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the ocean, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this event. It's a real pleasure to be here, in particular in the Indonesian Pavilion. Indonesia has a very special place in my heart. My first encounter with Indonesia was when I was a student traveling around in Southeast Asia, and the experience of the Indonesian hospitality and inclusiveness and really welcoming me and my friends. We really tight contacts that have been lasting ever since. So it was a very special experience to me. And also, as you know, when Sweden and Fiji hosted the first UN Ocean Conference in 2017, some of the most lasting impressions from the meeting were also in Indonesian. The commitment by Indonesia to reduce marine waste by 70% to 2025 was really an ambitious commitment at that time. And also a lasting impression was the encounter with Minister Susi. So you have made a huge impression on me and a lot of people. So when we are here at COP25, we have heard a lot about the science and also the last year with the IPBES report on the loss of ecosystems and biodiversity, and the IPCC report on ocean and cryosphere, pointing at the severity and the risks we are facing in a changing climate. So at this COP, we really hope to see some result on how to take the climate and ocean nexus forward. And Sweden and Fiji has continued to cooperate with the partnership, the Ocean Pathway, to drive this agenda. And we are so pleased to have Indonesia to join this initiative forcefully and coming up with proposal on how to move forward and get results from this COP. So we are discussing then how do we take the IPCC report and what it points towards, how can we integrate that in the discussion when we are talking about adaptation in the Nairobi Work Program, when we are talking about the loss and damages caused by climate change, when we are talking about the need for technology development, technology transfer and capacity building, but also on financing the solutions. So we're very, very pleased to partnering with Indonesia in this endeavor. We have a very important year to come. After this COP, we have to throw ourselves into the planning of the next UN Ocean Conference in June 2020. And we need to go to the next level. The UN meeting in 2017, I think, helped raise awareness, mobilize political momentum, and mobilize stakeholders to get involved in the ocean agenda. But we need to step up our efforts and build and further strengthen strategic partnership and strengthen investment and funding. And in particular also involvement with the private sector. So after the UN Ocean Conference, we will also have the IUCN meeting in Marseille. And in June, we are also expecting to have the WTO to finalize the discussion and come to some kind of agreement on abolishing harmful fisheries subsidies leading to overcapacity of the fishing fleet and illegal, unregulated, unreported fisheries. And to make that happen, we really need to mobilize now and put pressure on decision-makings in the WTO. We then have our ocean conference in Palau, which is an excellent opportunity to also highlight the specific needs and vulnerabilities of small island developing states, being so dependent on imports, on the resources from fisheries, and the vulnerability from extreme weather events and sea level rise. So that should be a good opportunity to focus on the small island states. Then we have, of course, the Convention on Biodiversity having its COP 15 in Kunming in China during the autumn. And there we also need to build momentum to come to an ambitious plan with the post-2020 framework to set the targets on protection of both marine areas, ecosystems and habitats, but also on land, of course. And above all, it's not about the percentage you protect only, it's about sustainable management in everything we do. So we have a really important year ahead of us. And we can look, when we talk about ocean and climate, we can see the ocean both as a victim to climate change, but we also need to look at the ocean as part of the solution. And we have also seen not only the scary reports, but also the promising reports showing that how much the ocean and marine ecosystems can contribute, but also the maritime sectors. So, for example, the high-level panel on a sustainable ocean economy has provided a blue paper pointing to that contribution of ocean and ocean-based industries. And looking towards 2050, there's a a 56 gigaton CO2 carbon dioxide equivalents gap from the current pathway to a 1.5 degree pathway. So 56 gigatons. And 20% of that is estimated that the ocean solutions could be closing that gap. And that means reducing emissions from maritime sector, using and developing ocean-based industries, but also looking at the fisheries sector and their contribution to food security and nutrition and shifting diets. And finally, also the co-benefits of working with nature-based solutions, both mitigating and preserving the carbon sinks, but also helping communities to adapt to the changes that are happening and the severe consequences. So we need to invest in nature-based solutions, and we see some movements. We are seeing replenishment of the different funds of the Global Environment Facility has a program for international waters, and we are seeing more and more applications and project proposals to the GCF involving ocean proposals, and the GCF has also recently taken a decision to partner with KfW and the Blue Action Fund on nature-based adaptation. So I think we will see more of this, and this is really needed contribution to step up these actions. So I look forward to hearing from other speakers and to take part of the discussions here today. And I thank you so much for listening and for coming to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for giving us a landscape of the opportunities and trends that we will be seeing moving forward to 2020 and beyond. For next speaker, may we please call on Ms. Fegi Nurbani of the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries of Indonesia, where she will be telling us more about climate and oceans from the perspective of our host, Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Alex. His Excellency, Bapak Ludohong and Bapak Hermono, and also Her Excellency, Helen Agren. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning for you all. I'll be quick. I'll try to be quick. Can I use this? Okay. I will try to share about the adaptation and mitigation for coastal community in Indonesia. In doing adaptation and mitigation measures, there are three key points that cannot be left. You must consider the key points in order to make it happen, to make it success. The first one, the economy. You cannot, it's hard to ask the people to do what they do, the environment thing without the economic consideration. So you must take it into consideration. The second one is the sustainability. And the third one is inclusiveness. So the three key points has to be considered if you want to implement any adaptation or mitigation measures. Okay, let me draw your attention to some our primary adaptation and mitigation measures. The first one is what we call with coastal resilience development. It's the orange dot, so that's the distribution area. And also the second one is hybrid engineering and also geotextile for coastal protections. If you see in the map, there are some area that has 2 dots. It means that the area has 2 programs, even though maybe in different districts. Okay, see, this is coastal resilient development. I took one example here in Malang, East Java.
the people there, the community-based group, they have the plan to develop mangrove ecotourism. So if you see there, this is Slungup. This is the area. It's in the south of Java, and they have what we call here Slungup Mangrove Conservation, or CMC. With some stimulant and with some assistance, the people there can develop a very what I think is very good ecotourism with profit 200 until 300 million rupiah a month, and have about 100 visitors, and can pay the salary to their employers about 1 until 2 million per month. So they developed the area because they built some basic infrastructures. They opened the access to the area, and then they began the campaign. One thing that interesting there, if you bring your own water bottle, but you didn't bring it back, then you have to find it. You have to find it. Otherwise, you cannot leave the area. So, never leave your plastic or bottle in the area, other than you have to bring it back, or you will get punishment. You have to pay, and that's quite expensive actually. But I think that's effective. There's a lot of people coming there, and I think it's more famous in local and also for international tourists. Okay, that's one of the story in coastal resilient development. So we try to encourage people to set their own goals, and we facilitate them. We give their assistance, and this is one of the success story. And then this is what we do here in Rembang Regency. The area is eroded. So you can see there's a very thin line of, it's a very thin line of mangrove here. It already lost the land, so it cannot protect the land anymore. So we make some intervention there with what we call hybrid engineering. We started in 2012 with some partners from Netherlands, what we call EcoShip Consortium. And now we are like upscaling the scale of the structure, and one of them is in Rembang Regency. You can see the difference here. This is the structures. You can see the difference between area that already restored and the area that are still eroded because it has no protection inside, in front of it. So after a few months, usually, or maximum 2 years, there should be enough sediment in behind. So this area is ready to be replanting. And then the community can, utilize it and use it for maybe for ecotourism or other purposes. This one, you can see, even without replanting it, actually mangrove grows naturally, even though there's small babies mangrove. This one, the intervention with the giant sandbag, because you cannot put the hybrid engineering structure in sandy beaches. We put a giant sandbag there, and this one is in Brebes. You can see also there's a lot of sedimentation, and this one, the mangrove line, is already moved forward. The line, actually, this is the old coastline. So we are restoring the coastline, but not too far, but beyond, but based on the historical data, the previous coastline. In the back of the structure, the community already start to build some structures for ecotourism. You can see this area is already become a tourist attraction, and also study as a natural laboratory for students from Indonesia and also from international university. Okay, this one is about the roadmap. We already start in 2009, and until 2019, we are already spending approximately about 204 million US dollar for adaptation and mitigation actions. I split it into 5 years because our plan is every 5 years. So you can see the trend, the budget trend is the trend is increasing, and we hope that in the next development plan we can get more, and we also open for corporations with you all, with the public sectors, with the donors, or with other stakeholders. We are very open to it. Okay, my last slide is our motto: exercise in local, experience in national, and upscaling the global. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy, for giving us the Indonesian context and what mitigation and adaptation actions in the ocean ecosystem actually look like. I would like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Alwe Dohong, the Vice Minister of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia. Sir, thank you for joining us today. For our next speaker, we have Dr. Arwandria Rukma of Rare Indonesia to talk about the implementation of ecosystems-based adaptation in coastal communities in Indonesia.
Thank you, Alex. Excellencies, Vice Minister, Ambassadors. I would like to start my presentation by echoing what Ambassador Hermono said in his remarks, that quotes some things from the SROC, from the IPCC report. Climate change impact on fish catches will affect income, livelihoods, and food security of resource-dependent community, including coastal community. Second one, the decrease in seafood availability will elevate the risks of nutritional health impacts on coastal communities. So this is quite sad to hear, but that's the fact, and we have to do something based on the SROC report. So here we are, RARE, under supervision of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia. We implement a program called Fish Forever. And the location of the program are situated in several sites in 3 provinces, spread over more than 50 sites. And we work together with the local governments. And in Southeast Sulawesi province, Helen mentioned that you were in Southeast Sulawesi before, so we have 22 sites there. We also work in West Papua, in Raja Ampat district, and there are still 9 candidate sites in North Sulawesi that we are still preparing to be the sites. So what's the program? What is Fish Forever? Basically, Fish Forever is a combination of several characters, several unique features in which what we call as managed access plus reserve that can provide incentives to the local fishermen or the local community, coastal communities as the manager of that area to be the priority or to be the preferred marine and fisheries users. Because they do the management, they do the protection, and for the sake of the fairness, they become the primary resource users. And this is supported by other components like monitoring and evaluation that is community-based, and also complemented by the local enforcement by the community. So the program itself also believe that it can contribute to social resilience as part of the EBA. How? It enhances the knowledge, it enhances the attitude and the behavior of the fishing community to adopt sustainable fishing practices. It also improves the capacity of fisheries management body at the very local level, at the cluster of village level. And you will be surprised to learn that these communities, if they are empowered well, if they are facilitated properly, they will be able to have fisheries management plan, they will have decision-making system, patrol procedures, and other things. And also they will have a wide participation in the fisheries management. The programs designed for ecological resilience is also there to be accomplished. Like the fisheries management body has decision making that is informed fully, but the climate change vulnerability assessment. This is very important because without such a good plan that is related with climate risk, then we may address something that is not really related with climate. And in terms of ecological measures, we do the coastal and marine resources ecosystem protection, such as the hard coral cover, the fish biodiversity, the fish biomass, and of course the coral diversity. And the pathway for sustainability designed by this program is through financial inclusion, like the training for the fisheries household at the coastal communities on a simple cash flow. At the end of the training, the community realize that actually when they have good financial recording system in the household level, they will see how much the catch the fishermen can get in a month and how much they spend. So financial literacy is important, and we also integrate the program with the local government development plans and budget. You may see in the picture here, this is the district development planning agency who inputted the development plan and the budget into the system that is developed by National Development Planning Agency and Ministry of Home Affairs, called Krishna. And how to have a right scale of this program. The pathway is available, this program, to inform the National Midterm Development Plan. We are the member of a working group on marine and fisheries managed by Bappenas in several focus group discussion. We were also participating and invited in several meetings by Bappenas on NAPS, National Adaptation Plan, and we helped the Southeast Sulawesi province to develop their provincial small-scale fisheries management plan that is also part of the larger fisheries management area plan, what we call in Indonesia WPP. And also to scale at the global level, this program share the lesson learned, the best practices from the ground to several available initiative and mechanisms like NDC partnership, the FEBA, Friends of IBA, GLISPA, and Global Working Group on Resilience or Fisheries. So the results have emerged. We see the climate information and vulnerability assessment has been adopted in the decision of fisheries management. There's also enhanced capacity building by the fisheries management body, and the management body is functioning, and they have the primary say in determining the way the local coastal fisheries is being done. And ecological resilience are also emerging. We see the coral reefs, the seagrass, the mangrove ecosystem are restored, are protected and managed, of course. And the reserve are also established by considering the climate factors. And also not to forget the interconnectivity among the habitats are also created by this approach. And the policy and governance result are quite also good, stunning to see on how the local government strategies and annual work plan and budgets are also covering this approach. So it becomes not only rare programs, but also the local government programs because they have their own funding to do the activities related with this program. The local regulation on fisheries in Southeast Sulawesi, in last month or 2 months ago, I think, the governor has signed governor regulation on managed access on fisheries management, and this has specific sections on climate change. So, as I start my presentation by quoting the SROC report, let me also quote some SROC reports to conclude my presentations, just to show you that this program is very much in line with the optimism that the SROC brings. If we have ambitions adaptation, then it has potential to reduce risks in many locations. Marine habitat restoration and ecosystem management tools can be locally effective in enhancing ecosystem-based adaptation. And lastly, strengthening responsiveness and precautionary approaches of existing fishery management will reduce the climate risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Arwan, for explaining to us Fish Forever and really showing us one of the opportunities for convergence between CSO and government partners in adaptation efforts on the ground. For our next speaker, we will have Dr. Tora Amend from the GIZ, where she will be talking about the emerging lessons we've been seeing for mainstreaming ecosystems-based adaptation efforts. Thank you.
Good morning. I think that you can hear me, right? Without a microphone, is that okay? Thank you.
Sorry, please use the microphone because we have the live.
Okay, right. I'll use the microphone then. Thank you. That's better. So I need to move around. I'm very sorry. Okay, so I need to be very brief also because we are way behind time and we want to have the panel. I'm looking forward to the panel. So this is just very briefly studies that we've done as GIZ in the last year in many communities, many countries around the world. And we've tried to work with Philippines, with Vietnam, with Peru, with Mexico, and with South Africa to design some of the lessons learned for mainstreaming EBA. How do we really get that into the policy cycle? And we've also done a study on governance of EBA. So we've learned that many people work on different levels, but how to pull that all together. This COP is about take action and let's act now, let's implement what we've been talking about on the high levels, but how can we do that really? And how can nature-based solutions make a difference in all of that? So this is very colorful, but this is to highlight a methodology or a very simple model that we adopted for analyzing. And what does it do? It says we have 3 different streams. It's the multiple stream model. It says, first of all, if we want to make change in whichever context, we have to consider whether people are aware of a problem. So do they realize that we have a climate change crisis in that sense? So this will vary according to the different states that they find themselves in. Then the second stream is, are solutions available? Are there NGOs or think tanks, Stockholm Resilience Center or Environment Institute or whoever coming up with solutions? When they come together with an awareness, yes, there is a problem and a solution, then we have a certain window of opportunity that people come together. They feel there's a problem, and yes, we have a solution. But they might not make it into real changes, because there we have the third stream, which is called the political stream. And there we have to analyze who is in command right now, who holds the power, how are policy cycles. So if we really want to make a change, then we have to look for the moment where all three streams come together. So awareness about an existing problem, solutions that are available, and the policy cycles and the political will to act. If we bring all three of them together, then we have a great chance to make a difference. And this is especially important, the model, I think, for oceans, marine and coastal communities, because this now, there is a collective awareness now, recently. I've done my PhD on marine and coastal communities in the Caribbean almost 30 years ago. And I've been fighting within GIZ for 20 years to realize that is a problem and a chance for a solution, but I was not heard. Now is the time. Now people are looking for solutions, so we are very close to this window here if we take into account the policy cycles of the governments in command. So again, the windows of opportunity in a very, very simple questioning: climate change, challenge and awareness. Who perceives which climate change hazard as a problem? Because the coastal communities might perceive something as a very different problem or something very different than the political leaders. So think about who perceives which hazard as a problem. Then the solutions, are there solutions out there, and is there a political will to act? So my recommendation: seize the moment, use the windows of opportunity that you can identify in your communities. And what we found in all of the analysis, all of the countries that we looked into, is there seems to be a generalized lack of strategic thinking. So one of the lessons for me was a key lesson when we worked in, I also worked in Indonesia for several instances, but I worked with Latin American countries for more than 30 years. And one of the moments that I learned is we worked very hard with a very, very good team in Ecuador on coastal communities, and we wanted to get our strategy out. We had a very good strategy. We wanted to have a party together with the team of the government, of the ministry there, and we had that big party and launched the strategy, and it was an excellent strategy, but half a year later, a new government came into term, and what does a new minister do usually? They have their own people, and they want to have their own strategies. So a very good strategy was burnt because we used the wrong moment to launch it. So use the opportunities, analyze the context that you're working in, and when is the right moment to propose a strategy, not to burn it. And work with all the different stakeholders involved. It's not only about the state, it's not only about the municipalities or the political leaders, it's about civil society. There is so much that we can take on board, and there's the great chances of the private sector. I know that many of my friends would not want to work. I'm part of the steering committee of IUCN, Commission on Protected Areas. Many of my colleagues say we are not really keen to work with the private sector. I personally think this is a big mistake. we have to sit down, but we have to define the conditions. Under which conditions do we reach out? So my last point here, try to understand the system that we work in, the social ecological system of the marine and coastal communities here. What are the functions and services of the ecosystem that they use? What are the values and benefits derived from the perspective of the local community there, but also from the perspective of the national ministries? And then who benefits? How is the distribution of the costs and the benefits done to make it fair, to have a fair share of the different sectors there? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgia, for sharing with us the lessons you've learned in your work. And now we move on to learning about the Aid Atlas and implications for ecosystems-based adaptation in coastal communities. May I invite to the stage Ms. Georgia Savitao of the Stockholm Environment Institute to talk about oceans and climate financing trends.
Thanks a lot, Alexandra. I'm also taking the mic because I think I will also be moving quite a bit. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here to be presenting. I think we've all heard during these days the importance of finance, and Helen Ogren this morning mentioned how important finance is for the oceans agenda. So that would really be the topic of my presentation today. In particular, I'll try to dive a bit into development finance. Now, every year, different bilateral funders, as well as some multilateral funds and development banks, as well as some private philanthropies, are reporting on their support to developing countries on a very diverse set of issues. And now the OECD takes this data and compiles them into a database called Creditor Reporting System. I'm not gonna lie, that's not like a perfect database. It has quite some flaws, but it's true that it's the most comprehensive database that we have, that we can explore and really get an idea. So over the past years, we've been working with this database, compiling different reports, and we realized that the data is really rich. And so we wanted to develop a tool called Aid Atlas to really enable everybody to very quickly get this information in just a couple of clicks and then try to start answering questions of, okay, that's how much finance is going to my region. Within my region, it goes to these specific sectors. Now, where do I want to focus? Is it effective? So we really want to enable this, this kind of discussion. So unfortunately, I couldn't show you live the tool, but I was able to do some screenshots that I will be showing today. But you're all free to enter in the tool and explore based on, on what you're more interested in. So let's see what the tool can offer. Well, first I can mention the tool covers, it's an international coverage, and so you can focus on different countries. But of course, for our session today, I'm going to focus on Indonesia. So first we can see how much climate adaptation finance has been going to the region of Southeast Asia. So we can see on the first row the different donors going into the different recipient countries. And we can see how Indonesia is the third biggest recipient in the region. And then within the recipient countries, which sectors are prioritized. Now we see general environment protection being by far the biggest. But then we also see fishing coming there together with agriculture and forestry as the fourth sector. Now, I'm going to focus, so the tool is quite interactive, so you can hover over and focus on what you want to see. Now here we can see the main funders of Indonesia, the total amount that Indonesia is getting for climate adaptation, and within Indonesia, which sectors are prioritized. Again, general environment protection seems be by far the biggest, but we see water supply and sanitation as well as agriculture, forestry, and fishing being a part of it. We see the distinction between bilateral donors as well as some multilateral. So climate investment funds appears to be a big player. But let's try to zoom in a little bit further and get some more information. So we can see what's the total development finance that Indonesia again received. I think I forgot to mention that all the figures I'm showing today are for the last 5 years. So for the last 5 years, we have the total amount provided to Indonesia on climate adaptation, and compare that to the total development finance in Indonesia. So we get a sense of how big climate adaptation is part of the cake. We can also see which are the top 10 donors of Indonesia's development finance. So we see United States and Australia being the biggest one. It's many bilateral donors. We see quite a few European players such as Sweden, but then we also see climate investment funds. So let's see again which are the main sectors prioritized within the region. We see the total amount for general environment protection. We see water supply and sanitation, transport and storage, and agriculture, forestry, and fishing. So I will be focusing more on fishing issues in my presentations. But before diving into fishing, we can see the top 10 supported projects. So we can really zoom in and have a look into the database itself. And here we can see the sector and as well as subsector. And we can look into the project title to gain a better idea of what kind of projects we're talking about. Now, this is just the top 10 supported projects, but in the software, we can download the relevant data set and really explore the full set of our selection. Now, we mentioned today a number of topics that are relevant for ecosystem-based adaptation, and I think disaster prevention and preparedness is quite essential. So I went through the tool, and here I have some of the visualizations for that. So we can see how the trend is going over time. We can see quite some peak in 2017. And I might be curious to ask, okay, what is that peak? Where does that come from? So using the tool, we can answer these questions. We can also see the different financial instruments used. So grants are by far the biggest, followed by loans. And then on the last picture, we see a very interesting comparison between commitments and disbursements. So commitments represents the finance that has been approved, while disbursements represents the finance that has actually been spent on the ground. Moving on, we see the 10 donors of Indonesia's development finance for disaster prevention and preparedness. Japan seems to be by far the largest one, followed by a number of countries. I'll move on, since I'm pointed out that I have 1 minute only left, and I'm happy to take further questions during the panel. Here I'm pointing out a few projects that are relevant for our session today, referring to the Bali Beach conservation projects. And now finally we're going into agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Again, interestingly, it seems that in 2017 there is a peak. And what I would like you to focus on is really this graph, which gives us a very interesting observation. So we see there is a huge gap between what has been approved and what has actually been spent on the ground. It's almost half. And that should be very alarming, because that means even though there has been a lot of commitments, what's spent on the ground is much less. And it means that there might be some implementation problems that we really need to dive and understand why and try to resolve. Another interesting observation is that fishing, which you see in this box over here, attracts relatively low amounts if you compare that with agriculture, which you see here, and forestry in Indonesia. Now, using the tool, we can zoom in into fishery if we're interested. And here I give a very quick overview of what's actually included in fishing. And we see that by far the largest share is on fishery development, followed by fishing policy, administrative management. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Just some very quick key messages. It is true that it is currently with the data we have, it is hard to get a clear picture on the oceans agenda, but it is not impossible. It is also relatively hard to get a clear picture on small-scale fisheries that we've referred quite a lot today. Finally, we've seen how finance is relatively limited compared to other sectors. And I'm happy to take further discussions on these topics later on the panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Georgia. And now we would like to call on Mr. Sabine Basniat of the Green Climate Fund to talk to us about the opportunities that we can find in their organization.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think I was supposed to be in a panel. Things got changed around, so okay. As we do in the fund, we do roll with it. So, Your Excellencies, thank you very much. I think we're really running out of time, so I'm going to try to make this very, very short. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Green Climate Fund, but we are the largest climate fund in the globe right now, and we are what we call, it's a catalytic fund, which is country-driven. So all projects that come to us that we approve or we manage are projects that are basically approved by you, Indonesia, or any other country, and it's working through our different partners for delivery. When it comes to our adaptation work as well as on EBA, EBA is something that we have seen where we've approved I think 3 projects right now that are either really a full ABA project or wherein there's components in there. The latest one was flood protection in Lao PDR. So now, I think one key thing that I just want to kind of touch upon here today is the key role of financing in oceans and coastal protection. Because I lead the energy efficiency and the transport sector, so you may be wondering what am I doing here talking about coastal protection. So one of the things that I'm actually working on now is really about marine transport, and not looking at marine transport. Marine transport from cargo shipping is a huge thing, but what we're looking at is through the vulnerable communities. We're looking at marine transport from the SIDS perspective. If you look at things before, let's just go to the Pacific, for instance. Pacifics, they are a proud race of people that were using catamarans to navigate the oceans. Now they've moved on to diesel, they've moved on to some other means, and it's not the most efficient. We did an analysis of boats that we found in Palau, and I actually took a look at the engine serial number of the outboard motors. These were Isuzu engines that were made during the World War II. So they've been reconstructed, remade, and then, but there's, the ingenuity of the people is it's running, and it's running well. So, that's one part of it, but it's not running at the full capacity, and it's not running in the way it should be running. So, but at the same time, people in the Pacific want to go back to their, traditional means. They want to go back to catamarans. They want to go back to what they call wakamotus. So that's kind of the things that we're working with the Pacifics right now, is how do we now work with them to basically, bring back the vacas into operation? How do you make it into a sea-bearing fleet again? And then that adds to two things. One, you have the transport part that builds on transport with cargo. Then the vacas are instrumental to fishing, because if you look at it now, a small boat in Palau can, with the diesel capacity, can go up to about, what was it saying? About 20 or 30 nautical miles, and then he has to come back again because he runs out of gas. Now with the vaca, they can continue on for 3 days of fishing, fill up that vaca, and come back. So there is a better return on that fishing investment as well. So it's these kind of things that we're looking at. And then when it comes to the financing part of it, as we saw from Georgia's slide, a lot of the money that's coming in, especially on coastal protection, EBA, is a lot of grants. And then one problem that I have as a mitigation person is I clearly don't like grants. I think, to make things sustainable, there's a place for grants and there's a place not for grants. And then I think for commercial sustainability, to make the project sustainable, we need to get the projects to as close to commercially viable as possible. So even when we're providing grants, we're looking at new ways of providing grants to in our projects. For instance, in Lao, the EBA, one of the things that we discussed with the project proponent was a really results-based granting system. As soon as the designs were met, if the design basically had that engineering capability and it was actually going to meet certain thresholds, that's when the grants kicked in, and then the grants would. So it's basically about seeing the results. That results leads to grants coming in, and then I think that's one way of looking at it. Now another one that we're looking at is a project in Kenya, where it's again a flood protection of a plain. I can't tell exactly where, but the option is not just, the first option was to just make concrete dikes all over the place. And then the AE came up with a really good idea of, instead of building dikes, was to actually build mud pylons, which acted as roads. So now the roads on that pylon actually became a revenue generator. So that's another way of seeing, how do you basically get revenue from co-benefits? Because that's another area where you're going to be seeing something that wasn't there before. Instead of just building a wall, now you have a road. The road basically, you have commuters on the road. That commuter is actually basically, you get something out of it. So it's a diversified thinking. And then just as I'm ending my 2 cents, is to actually appeal to you and all of you in this room. The Green Climate Fund, we are about catalytic financing. We're about risk financing. And we're about outside the box thinking. So if you're actually going to think about sending us a proposal, take out that, run as the business as usual kind of a model. Think of something that's clearly innovative. It's something that for a fact that no one in the world is ever going to finance, and bring it to us. We will probably finance it. Thank you very much.
Risk financing and innovative thinking. Thank you, Mr. Sabine, for sharing that with us. We apologize that we have run out of time and we do not have a panel discussion right now, but our speakers will be around to take in any of your questions that you might have. Apologies also to Helen. We wrongly designated you as Director General in the last slide, although the correct designation would be Ambassador. I would like to thank all of you for attending our side event today, for joining us this morning. As our speakers have shared to us, there are 2 things that we hopefully take away from today. That is, collaboration between stakeholders is essential in all our efforts. And most importantly, that now is the time. The awareness is high and people want solutions. So now is the time to act on oceans. With this, thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Okay, at the ending of the session, there will be a token of appreciation given by Bapak Nur Adi Wardoyo. Yeah. on behalf of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And after that, we will have a photo session with all the speakers and moderator. Therefore, I would like to invite all the speakers to come on stage, including His Excellency Bapak Hermono. Please, all the speakers to come on stage, and the moderator as well.
Oh, right here. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Group photo. Yes.
And we will invite all the speakers, moderator, Bapak Nur Adi Wardoyo, and also Bapak Hermono to join the photo session. Please give a round of applause to all the speakers and moderator for the first session. That was a very fascinating session. And we will have another session with the title of Developing Commitments to Explore the Prospect of Integrating Ocean and Coastal Wetlands Issue into Greenhouse Gas